What's up guys, David here from Phone Buff, and in this video we're going to be doing a speed comparison test between the Moto X and the HTC One to see not only which one is faster, but also how much of a difference there is, if any, between the two phones. Now the main story here is the difference in specs, or more specifically the processors. The HTC One has a quad-core Snapdragon 600 processor clocked at 1.7 GHz, while the Moto X has a dual-core Snapdragon S4 Pro also clocked at 1.7 GHz. Both phones have 2 GB of RAM and also share the same GPU or graphics processor in the Adreno 320, and the only real difference after that, which could affect performance hardware-wise, is the fact that the HTC One's display is pushing a lot more pixels with 1080p resolution compared to a 720p resolution on the Moto X, which could put more of a strain on the One's GPU. Okay, so with the One just dominating the Moto X in the boot up test, we're ready for some good old-fashioned benchmarks, first of which will be the all-new Geekbench 3. As you can see here, the Moto X scored a slightly higher score of 678 compared to 665 on the One in the single-core test, but as you'd expect in the multi-core test, the quad-core HTC One really separated itself with a score of 1,934, almost 700 points higher than the 1,257 that the Moto X was able to achieve. Next benchmark is Antutu, where again the HTC One scores higher with a score of 25,809 over the 21,368 on the Moto X. And finally, the last benchmark we'll run here is the old but still fun to run benchmark in Quadrant, where the Moto X scores a 9,095, which is about 3,500 less than the 12,635 on the HTC One. Respectable benchmark scores all around, but the edge definitely goes to the quad-core HTC One in this test. But those are just synthetic benchmarks, right? What really matters is how these devices perform in the real world. So we'll load up a couple of popular apps on each phone and see how they do. First app we'll run is Score Mobile, and we saw the content just a split second faster on the HTC One. Tapping on a game loads up at about the same time on both, maybe a little faster on the Moto X, and loading up team info is as close as you can possibly get. Second app we'll test is the one that most of us use in Instagram. Here loaded up a split second faster on the Moto X, profile a split second faster on the One, and this picture here loaded up again at about the same time. Next app we'll run is a game actually in Temple Run 2, which uses a lot more processing power than the other two apps we tested, so a little bit more interesting of a test that should give us some separation here, and as you can see it did, with the game loading up a little bit faster on the Moto X than it did on the One. Okay, so when it comes to loading apps and games, the two phones are really close. So close that the difference between them is negligible, but if I had to give the edge to any one phone, it would definitely be the Moto X. Alright, so the next test we're going to be running here is one that really stresses the CPU in transcoding a video. I've loaded the same video file on both phones here, and we'll transcode them at the same time and see what happens. So as you can see, the Moto X has pulled away with a slight lead in transcoding the video file, and we'll finish up first, which is really interesting since going into this test in particular, I expected the One to outperform it considering the test is so processor intensive, but nope, not the case, which is exactly why we do these speed tests on Phone Buff. With that out of the way, let's move to the final test in the browser speed test. First site we'll go to is of course phonebuff.com, which was really close. They loaded the pages differently, so it's kind of hard to tell, but the content finished loading up first on the One, whereas the status bar finished first on the Moto X. Tap this article at the same time, and while these guys are loading up, I'll let you guys know that both phones are connected to the same Wi-Fi network. Browsing history and cache have been cleared, so it's nice and even. And as you can see, both phones loaded up the page at about the same time, with the status bar finishing up first on the Moto X. Going to theverge.com, the Moto X loaded up the mobile site just a little bit faster. Tapping on an article, and we get the opposite results this time, with the One loading the page faster. So let's try to settle this by going with a more demanding test by loading up the full and media-rich Verge site. So we're seeing most of the content first on the Moto X. We see that ad first, and yep, the Moto X seems to be just one short step ahead of the HTC One. As far as the browser test goes, I think it's a little too close to call, so I'll let you guys do it down in the comments below, but in the end, both phones are really fast. Both are smooth in just about everything they do, and you won't really be disappointed with either when it comes to performance. If I had to choose a winner, and it's hard to do because it was so close, it would have to be the Moto X. Right now, the OS and most of the apps out there just don't take full advantage of those extra cores, and with less of a demand on the GPU due to its lower 720p resolution, the Moto X is the slightly better performer. Alright guys, that's it for me in this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more mobile technology videos just like this. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.